Hey, what is going on, guys? Jake Verdon Tech here, back with another video, and we are continuing my Lian Li O11 mini build. As you can see from the B-roll footage at the beginning of this video, we did most of the water cooling portion of this build, planning and building out our loop, bending the rigid tubing, and putting the water block on our GPU. And I gotta say, this build has come together even better than I expected. We did not finish it in this video. There's still a couple things we need to do as far as the prep before we actually fill the loop, and I haven't yet installed the power supply. And there is one particular bend I haven't quite finished yet for the GPU going to the CPU. We still have to make the connection there for our water cooled loop. That one's a little bit tricky. I think I'm going to end up ordering a couple of offset fittings to try and fill that gap. It's super short, and I did try a couple really tight 90s, but it still is just too tight of an area to try and fit that with the bend. So kicking things off with the tubing, I have gone with the Corsair Hydro X frosted tubing, and I gotta say, I really love this tubing. I really like the kind of matte frosted finish. I think it's a great touch, especially for this build. And this tubing is 14mm outer diameter. The last couple of water cooled builds I've done was the 16mm OD tubing. And I gotta say, I actually really like the 14mm. I think it's got a clean, sleek look, and especially for this build that is in a little bit smaller of a case, I think it fills it just perfect. So as far as my approach for the loop, I really just kind of wanted to keep it clean and pretty simple. We did get a little bit crafty with some of the bends that we did, and we started with the one going from the CPU to our 240mm radiator, which I am very particularly proud of. If you're trying to do a tubing run that kind of needs to have a bend on multiple axes, it can be tricky because the length. If you're a little bit off on one axis, you don't have the freedom to just trim down one end, which is one of the nice things of just doing a single 90 from one point to another on the system. But in this case, like going from the CPU to the 240, we had to do a couple, and they are on different axes. But this bend turned out really nice, and it just clears the RAM and looks beautiful in my opinion. The trickiest one was probably the 240 going down to the pump, as once again we did all 45s, but we did have to go from one axis to another, and I ended up kind of cheating a lot of these by using rotary fittings. A lot of the components that I use, they don't quite line up if you're just going from point to point with 90s. So some are a little bit offset, and that's where these offset rotary fittings come in, and we can kind of slightly adjust it, and it can really close the gap for areas that are kind of hard to fit a bend. Next, we turned our attention towards the GPU block and getting that installed on our MSI Ventus 3080. And we are installing the Corsair Hydro X water block for this GPU. I've always loved the look of these Corsair water blocks, and luckily, because the shroud on this GPU block does come black, everything is easily removable as far as the coverings. So we pulled off the shroud and the shroud around the inlet and outlet, and we were able to give them a nice coat of white paint to really match this build and further customize it. The other components I decided to paint was the trim piece on the EK pump and res combo that we're using, which was a little tricky because it's not a surface that really has a good grit to it that wants paint to stick. But the paint job turned out okay. And then we also did paint the brackets white for the pump and reservoir combo. The GPU block install was overall pretty straightforward. Once all the screws were removed, it was a little tricky because the thermal paste was really gummy and sticky, so the graphics card didn't want to split from the air cooler. But carefully prying different sections of the PCB, we were able to get it apart. We did go ahead and mount the two NVMe SSDs. We're going to do a 1TB for the boot drive and critical applications drive. Then we did a 2TB for what's going to be my game drive. Might be a little excessive, but I have been running two separate 1TB NVMe's, and I am kind of capped out on storage on my current system, so we decided to up it a little bit on the game drive. After installing the newly painted water-cooled graphics card and inserting some of the tubing for our water cooled loop, this build is really taking shape, and I just love kind of the aesthetic, the all white color scheme. It's just turning out to be a very clean, beautiful build. I think the symmetry with the tube runs really also add to it. It's kind of neat how towards the left side where some of our core components are, we don't have a whole lot of runs from the tubing going on. And then when it goes towards the right side of the case, they all kind of align vertically right in front of the pump and reservoir combo. So that is going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this build log, just giving a little bit of a build update as I've kind of slowly worked on this build. I really enjoy just taking my time with these and really just making, I feel like the build is always better when you take your time with it. And especially in this case, it's really starting to pay off. The next video, we will be closing out this build. We are going to install the power supply, make any of the extra cable extensions we need, make the last tubing run going from the GPU to the CPU, and we will fill the loop and get the system running for the first time. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button, and if you want to see more tech related videos like this one, be sure to subscribe. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.